Good morning, friends. Good morning, Rabbi Creditor. It's a distinct honor and pleasure to be here this morning with you in conversation about allyship. My name is Rabbi Mike Moskowitz. My pronouns are he, him. I am the scholar in residence for trans and queer Jewish studies at congregation based in Chastera, which is the world's largest LGBT synagogue, and it's located here in New York City. And I work in allyship and advocacy, and I'm joined this morning by an old friend, a dear friend, rabbi and teacher, colleague, Rabbi Menachem Creditor, who's the scholar in residence at UJA. And thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Hi, beautiful Rabbi. It is good to see you. Hi, everybody. It is an honor to partner, not just friend and friend, but institution and institution and community with community, especially on TDOR, to stand here together to have a conversation that I'm going to do my best with. I want to be a good ally, which means ready to make mistakes, trying to do my best, ready to learn, ready to listen, and today especially called to bear witness.
Today is a hard day. Today we remember victims of transphobic violence and the work that still needs to be done. This year in particular, I was thinking when I sat down to write another article with my dear friend Seth Martin, who's also the board chair of Keshet, that how is it that there's a list? How is it that there's a list with names of people that were murdered this year? And I think one of the things that is so important to just say from the very beginning that trans lives matter, but the lives they live also matter. Just to be on one side of the brink of not being murdered is not a win. It's better than the violence, but we need to have systemic change to reorder the world, that people should not have to fear, and that they're able to be able to live full lives. So this conversation between two straight cis men, rabbis, is going to first acknowledge the awkwardness of allyship. It's predicated on the world being broken. If folks were not being dehumanized, if folks were not being hurt, other people wouldn't need to stand up and do something about it. And what's so tricky, one of the many things that's so tricky about allyship is that what can be very affirming and supportive for one can be traumatic for another. And so I would say the first kind of rule of allyship is know to whom you're in relationship with, know who you're trying to ally, and that we need to be able to listen. The voice of an ally is a fundamentally different voice than the first person lived experience. And often it's a function of proximity, that it's very easy to hate people that we've never met, that we've never come to experience. As a proof text, Jacob's brothers, the verse says, saw him from afar and sought to do him harm. So part of the ally is, the role of the ally is to amplify that voice so that it is personal for everybody. And as rabbis, part of the theological part of being an ally is that it might not be our child, but it is God's child, right? It might not be our person that we're in relationship with, but it's somebody that God deemed worthy and necessary for this world. And so if we want to have a relationship with God as a parent, then we need to be able to take care of our trans and gender nonconforming community members as siblings. So I just want to kind of offer just an acknowledgement that it's awkward to talk about these things on a lot of levels, but it is much more awkward and criminal to be silent. So we're here in solidarity to recognize that this only exists because of the brokenness of the world, but we are deeply committed to being in the partnership to repair it. And I guess, Rabbi Creditor, you've been doing social justice work for a very long time. You've been proactively involved in repairing the world before I was. How is it that this has become to you, a place of awareness?
I don't know that my resume is longer than yours on this. I think that we've both lived lives that have stories in them, and we've both, I think, done the inner work and continue to do the inner work and are committed to doing the inner work, to being present in God's universe as servants. And that's my simplest answer, though I can flesh it out a little bit more. I don't really know when I became aware of how little I knew. I don't remember recognizing that I'd never really understand everything. I think we emerge from adolescence at different points in our lives, and it isn't limited to our teen years. When I got smicha, when I was ordained in 2002, I began my work as a rabbi in Boston and Sharon, Massachusetts, and then I was blessed to join a community in Berkeley, California. And the culture of those two communities was radically different, even if the tradition that we affirmed in the synagogue community was structured similarly. The different people that came, the different people that were curious, and the environment that we were in was different from suburban Boston, where diversity was, beginning to be explored, to Berkeley, where diversity was the language, if not entirely true on the ground, right? And so I do remember one moment that really struck me, actually two. There was a member of the shul, actually wasn't yet a member of the shul. I used to get calls all the time. I'm curious about Judaism. Can we talk? And that was my favorite thing to do. It remains my favorite thing to do. Someone's interested in the thing that animates my very soul. Let's talk. So this person comes in, we've never met before, and they say their name, and I'm interested in Judaism, but I want you to know that I'm a trans man, and I don't know what to do with this. I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings. And first of all, I was just overwhelmed at their bravery, right? Oh my God, they crossed the threshold into a synagogue as someone who wasn't Jewish. That's like not simple and only the first level. They trusted a rabbi they didn't know who could potentially be an authority figure who would wield tradition in a weaponized way, in a judgmental way, God forbid. But I know that happens sometimes. And I grieve for the human beings who are not treated as human beings by religious leaders or by anyone really. And so this person is speaking to me, and I didn't have the language at all. I did not have any vocabulary. I didn't have any experience. And I'm sure I made lots of mistakes, but they were very forgiving. And when it came time, because they were through and through invested in joining the Jewish people, learning Torah really so much, there were questions about the ritual when it came to the actual conversion itself, because he is a man. His body hasn't always been male. I don't know, and I wouldn't ask, what should I say? It was such new ground for me. I didn't know what to do, especially when it came time for the name. Because we have a very special thing we do with the Torah. When someone comes to a new moment of their life, we celebrate at the Torah with an aliyah, with an honor of being called to Torah. And the binary way in which, at least I had always called people to the Torah. This person, Ben, that person. So this person, the son of that person. This person, Bat, this person, the daughter of this person. But so I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, I'm Ben. Use Ben. I said, oh, okay, that's what I should do. And it was one of the first moments for me that his truth was the way I knew God saw him. It wasn't up to me to make that decision, and my rabbi's manual didn't have guidance here. And I remember just becoming so overwhelmed and full of tears that I was able to be present for this person as they took their place, not just in the Jewish community, but in God's eyes in this framework, with all the honor anyone should ever have. And not to say that this corresponds to that, but I had another experience where someone else who was a trans man was getting married and said, I don't know what language you should use when you bless me and my partner. So I'm sure, I'm going to ask you this question in a second, but I'm sure that there's language out there instead of Ben or Bat. I really struggled. So I maybe other people use this, but I thought I decided to use the phrase pre-beten, right? The fruit of the womb. You are a child. You were born. You're the image of God. And those were two learning experiences where, for me, I was taking a personal spiritual risk, but not like the person who was trusting me, because I just wanted to get it right. So does that say when? I don't know. Does that say how? Only so far. But this is a day not only of recognizing when things went well. I hope more rabbis get it right. I really hope more rabbis get it right, because I know of other cases where we don't. And to quote one of my rebbes, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, he says, in a free society, some are guilty, all are responsible. And I feel, and I know you do too, my brother, I feel so deeply responsible to help myself and others really listen well and be present in a dignifying way of every other human being. So I'm so, I say curious, but I'm not like, I'm so emotional about even the question. You know, how do you do what you do? How do you experience people who are on their own journeys when the way we come to it is with our tradition, which has so much structure? What have been ways that you've been touched and that you've felt transformed by this encounter?
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And rabbis, I think, like all clergy, like all people, we want to get it right. But when you're standing on the stage, when you by the stender and you're on the bima, people have expectations to get it right, and we don't have magic answers. And our tradition requires an evolution of language. One of the nice things about our tradition is that it recognizes the limitations of language. Language will never be as expansive as an experience. As a biblical proof text, when Moses says that he's aral sifasayim, that he has a speech impediment, what that means, the Maharal says, is that he experienced God, and that experience can never be put in words. So how do you talk about that? You can't. It's not. But we try. I think for me, the turning point, and for me, it was also deeply personal getting involved, was the awareness that I can't know. I never, since I was a kid and told which bathroom to use, never thought about my own gender. And so when someone said to me, no, you don't understand, I said, you're right, but like, how can I be helpful if I can't possibly? And it's not dissimilar. As a white person, seeing police officers is not scary for me in terms of my lived experience. It's not. In fact, growing up, we were taught, if you're ever in trouble, call the police. They're there to help you. Like, that was the only lane that I had in terms of an identity, because that was my experience, but that's not the experience of most. So not recognizing the space between, our tradition also says that the greatest kind of level of knowledge is adalo yada, to know that you just don't know. And for me, that was actually very generative, to know that being cis, being somebody whose gender identity and is the way in which it was assigned and perceived, and there was never tension, it's actually a limited awareness. And so when I first started meeting members of the trans community, being able to see the divine experience as being more expansive, being reflected, right? We think a lot about people being created in the image of God. Well, God doesn't have an image, right? So my God is an all-gender God, the source of all gender. And being able to see the spectrum of unique blends of the gender experience gave me kind of a greater understanding of the capacity of God. And so one of the things, and then I'm gonna push it back to you in terms of kind of the text that speak to you, but people often ask that once I kind of had an awareness that my role of an ally could be one of my own spiritual practice, like, did I need to find new Torah, or it was like a new set of lenses, or like, how is it you can reconcile all of these things? And I would say it really is. It's a function of the lenses. Do we see the world through homophobic or transphobic lenses? Or are we willing to kind of remove those and allow the text to speak for themselves? Just in this week's Torah portion, I think we have one of a beautiful model of the struggle for identity. Jacob, the mystics tell us, was formed in the womb first. He came into a state of existence before his brother Esau. And so he identified at the core as being a firstborn, as being the firstborn. And the verses tell us, struggled in the womb, comes out second. Esau, which is seen as kind of an evil figure, the rabbis say he was called Esau not because it was red, but because he saw himself as finished, as complete. There was no more work left to be done. He came out as a winner in first place, and that was it. Jacob saw himself as somebody who needed to struggle in a broken world, that the world should be able to see him the way in which he saw himself. not as a figment of his own imagination that he came out second, how could you be a firstborn, but really as a manifestation of a truth that transcends our limitations of understanding of the physical realm. If people are not bothered that you can make Kiddush Friday afternoon when the sun is still out, or that you could even have the first day of creation when there is no sun at all, if those things don't bother you, or that Jacob can actually earn the birthright when coming out second, right? It's just a function of this world coming to catch up with a higher truth that members of the trans experience and for genderqueer experience, it's an awareness of gender beyond the body. We have a tradition of gender-based spiritual practice. There are aspects of gender which are social construction. There are aspects of gender that our tradition speaks. Even egalitarian movements still have a different ask for conversion, right, around gender, and it's tricky for members of the genderqueer and those who don't fit into the binary. So Jacob, just to come back to it, finally is able to have his father see him the way in which he sees himself, and it involves putting on clothing, right, as a way of presenting to the world and identifying to the world as a reflection of an inner truth. And that is the struggle of Judaism. We are deeply engaged in that struggle, and in that struggle is holiness. When Jacob is wrestling with the angel and is successful, God gives Jacob a new name. And the name is not Tuchal. We're not known as B'nai Tuchal, the children of those who overcame. We are the children of the struggle, says the Chiddushei HaRim, because the struggle of this world being so broken invites and obligates us to go all in, to be able to rectify it so that the divine truth is manifested in this world. And so I would say in every letter of the Torah, as somebody who believes that it is infinite, is eternal, that God spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai about trans rights and trans inclusivity, that it is for us to uncover and discover, as opposed to kind of invent and create. But regardless how a person's faith-based tradition brings them to the place is one of radical inclusivity, of equality, and of celebration. So I'm curious, maybe you want to share with folks some of the texts or the teachings that inspire you and give you guidance and nourish your soul to take on the precarity, to use your platform and privilege as agency for this cause.
I got to start by saying I could just listen to you teach all day.
Very kind.
God, what a gift you are. And the confusion that I have around the way that you reconcile tradition, God, and social justice, it kind of melts as you teach. So this isn't false praise, and it's not complete praise, which no one should ever hear. So I'm just giving you a little bit of it.
Thank you very much.
Let me start with the parsha where you were also, right? Because I in as much as because of the commentaries and the human souls that connect with the text over the generations, there are ways of reconciling some of the really thorny parts of Torah. This week is hardly simple. I mean, the way that the dynamic of Jacob's family is so familiar. Again, I'm sad to say it. But Breshit is all too resonant. We understand these things in as much as God is involved, and this is in a very different setting and time of the world. The way that, Jacob goes in to receive the blessing that the Torah wants us to see as rightfully his, even though the birth order, no matter what the mystics say, the birth order is he came out second. So the Torah wants us to see it as his, but he doesn't come by it in a simple way. And this moment is so torturous for me to read, and I can only imagine what it is for someone else to read who doesn't have the privilege that I was born into, having never earned it myself. As you said, both in terms of the color of my skin and in terms of being a cis man, I don't know. I just don't know. So what would it be like? What is it for someone who isn't seen fully, or who is judged for being who they are, if they are seen, to read a text where Jacob is told by his mother, who overheard the original instruction because somehow Isaac, in his elderly state, sees Esav as some manifestation of physicality, of masculinity, maybe. I don't even know what to say it. I was in an a cappella group. I was given the Esav Award for having a hairy chest. Like, there are ways that I think Esav gets a bum rap in the Torah too, like Nebuch for Esav. He's not simple,
Awesome.
but that also means he's not a cartoon villain, right? And so, oy for everybody. So in the midst of Isaac choosing Jacob, which is so complicated, and Isaac choosing Esav, and Rebekah choosing Jacob, in order for Jacob to come in for the blessing, he dresses up. But he doesn't dress up as his true self, in as much as maybe one day there can be elements of Esav and elements of Yaakov, and that's what it is to be a whole family where we complement each other's identities and presence in some beautiful collective way. Like that would be my experience of God that I ache for, where there is room enough in our family, and we all say so, and we all give each other room, and we don't judge each other for being individuals, all created in the image of God. But in this parsha, that doesn't quite happen yet, because Jacob goes in wearing his brother's clothes. Not only that, and this has been the part of the parsha that always, I don't know how to understand it. Maybe you have some teaching on it. Before he goes in, his mother takes the skin of the animal that they just slaughtered, and she puts it on his arm and on the smooth part of his neck, so that he'll feel hairy when his father touches him. Now, as a child, my mother used to give me haircuts. And I used to put a little water on my chest and took the hair that fell off and put it on my chest, because, there's something sweet about that too. I don't want to only look at the part of it that's troubling, at least for me. So there's sweetness to it, but this moment is so fragile. So he goes in and the skin was just on the animal. So this is not dried skin. It's not tanned. It's not cured. It's not. What does he feel like having to present himself literally in someone else's skin? And I think that I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know what it feels like to wonder about my body in that way, to know that who I am is something that not everyone can see. And this parsha ends with such family fissure. Jacob runs for his life. And then, I'll say that for me, where it begins to pivot in hopefully a healing way, is Vayifga b'makom. He runs headlong into Makom, which is one of our most glorious names for God. Right? He crashes into God. And I don't know that that's what the text originally meant. I don't know that that's the way Jacob felt. I don't know that's the way everybody feels. But what I wish for in Jewish contexts, in traditional Jewish contexts, which is where you and I think, have voices that could help, especially, and ears that could listen well and amplify what we're learning from our friends, from our teachers, on a day of memory for those who have been murdered for being who they are, and hurt for being who they are, and treated without dignity despite being created in the image of God. This parsha, like much of Breshit, much of Genesis for me, models what not to do, or at least tells us of a problematic context that needs healing. So that's how I hear this week. And even though I have other texts that lead me in my activism, I'm crying a little bit. I'm crying a little bit today. Yeah. And those are only my tears.
Yeah.
So how does your heart respond to this stuff?
Yeah, I feel physically dehydrated from all the crying this week. This week was just a really hard week for me. But I think spiritually, I feel hydrated in the recognition that the world that God created in the garden before the sin was perfect. It was a utopia. It was literally the Garden of Eden, right? There was no state, right? There was no suffering, there was no pain, there was no death, there was no inequality. All of the things that we see are a result of that. And so we realize that, this is not a God issue, in that, God did God's part. We broke it and it's on us to fix it. So I would say like two things. One, to address the text in this week's Torah portion, and then to offer a more direct answer to what you said, responding to these things in ways which I think resonate with you around love, is that the mystical tradition teaches that in the garden, before the sin, the soul was not restrained or constrained in the same way, that that it was just a light. It was or with an aleph. And the mystics say that the aleph, the recognition of the Lufei Shel Olam, the oneness, the one thing that was never created, God, was separated for us. God said no, we didn't listen, and there were issues of consent. And so the aleph of God was kind of taken away. The aleph of emes, of truth, was then just replaced with mace of death, and adam of humanity with just dam, etc. And so the mystics explain that the aleph of or, of that light, was replaced with the ayin of or forming skin. That there's a way in which our skin today is really the body essentially is the clothing of the soul. And whatever shame the universe has around body and body image very broadly, the mystics explain that it's meant to remind us of the mistake that we made when God said not to do something and we didn't listen. That it has nothing to do with what our bodies look like, but the fact that we have a body, that our spiritual identity is so concealed, it's so hidden, it's so constrained in a physical space. That was not God's intention. God wanted us to be able to be intimate and close, like to be able to cleave without the separations. And so the commentators and mystics again point out that there's one interpretation that the clothes that Jacob wore to dress up like Esau were actually the clothes that God made for Adam and Eve in the garden. And that's why the verse says, right, that it's the smell of the field, right? Rashi says it's the smell of the Garden of Eden. Because if you think about it, right, Rashi's bothered that these things do not smell good, right? This is not a pleasant thing, but on a spiritual level. And so, right, the kol is the kol of Yaakov, that there's this spiritual identity being present and dominant, finding expression, where the hands are really, it's physical, but that voice is coming internally.
I only have to interrupt to do this.
Yeah.
Where you and I learn in our most, like, we all go, at that moment. So for you, I want to go,
Thank you with the thumbs.
Right.
So I think that, when we think about this world, God is a truthful God. God is a good God. God doesn't put extra people. God doesn't make mistakes. So the more that we're able to recognize that to work in this world is like trying to separate out all of the things which are false and the things which are real. And as a rule, when you have people who have power and are looking to hoard that at the expense of those who don't have the basic rights, it's a great indicator that this is not about truth, right? God isn't homophobic, God isn't transphobic, but people are. And that's a function of education. It's a function of getting to realize that that those are, like all of the phobias of this world, a function of not understanding the true goodness of things. And so one of the things that I think for me as a straight cis person, and one of the challenges that I've heard a lot from people in relationships with those who are transitioning, is that they feel their own identity is being threatened by the identity of their partner. One of the most common questions I get from folks who are married in hetero kind of normative spaces, a man and a woman, and then one person transitions. And the person who doesn't transition says, well, what about my identity of being straight? How can I be a straight person being married to somebody of the same gender? And we don't have great language for this. The question is real. However, if we think about if somebody is gay and they marry someone of the opposite gender, right, they're no less gay because their partner is of the opposite gender. And when we say that, like, love is love, I think there's actually some deep, there's a lot of depth there. Not just that love is love, but that when we don't understand something, right, and we can't find language, there is an expansiveness of the love, right? The word have, love, means to give. It's expansive, that it fills the void. When the Talmud doesn't know the answer to a question, it says teku, right? Which is an allusion, according to some, to Eliyahu Navi, right? Tishbi, taritz kushis v'bais. That Tishbi, Eliyahu Navi, Eliyahu Tishbi, right? The prophet from this town will come. And we know that he's given the covenant of peace. And so when we don't know an answer to a question, we fill the void with love and with compassion. And I know that for you, right, and you're both as a musician and as a songwriter, and the song, Olam Chesed Yibana, the tune that you have for that, we sang when we got arrested in DC over DACA. And when the rabbis who were there got arrested. And it's a powerful response. And it's not superficial that love is love. What it means, I think, on a deeper level is that if you love somebody and you want what's best for them, the language piece doesn't make a difference. A child wants a hug. The words will never do, right? Somebody's in pain. They want to feel the love. So we don't need to have language in that. Like, I don't understand. Is there a moment where Jewish law can affirm and validate a transition, right? Because for some it's this, and for some it's fixed, and for some it's fluid. And how can you be male and female and neither and both? And if like, okay, great. Like, it could be we don't have access to that information, but that's not a deterrent, right? And at all to being able to express the love we have. And the regret that we can feel that, like, I wish I could put this into words. And anyone who's ever been in any sort of relationship with anybody knows the frustration of, I wish you could feel how much love I have for you. And so, we can try to put into words, but no card can ever convey that. And no poem can convey it because it's just limiting. But what's not limited, and it's not limited, is that. So I want to just hear from you what your thoughts are of what are ways that we and other rabbis and other clergy and other lay leaders are able to say, listen, I don't have all the answers, because who has all the answers? Nobody has all the answers. How can we possibly explain anything? But what can we do to kind of amplify and provide kind of the echoing of that love to the universe?
What a prompt, man. What a prompt. Look, I think that, you and I as friends also have shared, like, what is it to grow in this world, to grow our own hearts, and I think that's big work. I think it's big work. And I think the first thing I would say to rabbis or clergy or religious leaders of any kind is just, first of all, check your own heart. Are you okay? Because one of the challenges, I think, of at least Jewish tradition, especially biblical tradition, and we're always living in our parsha, we're always living in the Torah portion. So, sometimes the Torah is telling the story of a scarcity moment, right? There's not enough food, there's not enough water, there's not enough love, there's not enough birthright, there's not enough blessing. And as you said before so beautifully, like, that's not God's truth. There's always enough love. There's always enough blessing. If love, this is Victor Hugo, right? To love another person is to see the face of God. All right, so I love you. And because I love you, and I really do, I'm experiencing God not in my screen. You're right here with me. The love is turning a two-dimensional experience into a heart-piercing, three-dimensional reality. And you said before, I'm going to sort of bring different elements of what we've been talking about. You said before, how is it possible that there's a list of people we need to remember right now? A list of trans people who have been killed. I think love demands open eyes. Love demands open eyes. Who is before us, and what haven't we been seeing? What have we been missing? I am surprised that there's a list. How can there be a list? And the answer is, there's a list. We're in the middle of a pandemic. These aren't numbers, these are people. And because of social distancing, I don't physically see them. I certainly couldn't see 250,000 Nebuch. I can't see. But love demands that I try. And love also demands of me that I don't see how you fit into my narrative. That's not adult, mature love. That's not the love that God had for us by giving us selfhood. And that's not what it is to love God back. Meaning, I have the image of God. I am the image of God. You are the image of God, but I'm not God. Right? Different sparks of the totality of infinity are within us, but that is different than the source. And so what is it to be, a religious leader and try to, forget religious leader. What is it to be a person and to try to love? And to not know what the definition of love looks like in every moment, and not to have the language for it. I think I don't want to presume that this is accurate. I just know my own experience. Like, I had a lot of work to do myself, to know how to love myself. And only as I've continued to do that work, which is ongoing, do I have any clue how to love my partner, how to love my children, how to love my community, how to love my God. It's one of the most powerful things. I know it's obvious in the text, but it wasn't obvious to me until, until I led a real life that included wounds and sadness. The verse, it's the golden rule, literally. Love your neighbor as yourself, love your friend as yourself. So I focused on reacha, love the other person. Kamocha is really important, like yourself. How do I know how to love that person or even God if I don't love me? I have to be a courageous human being. And when my own hand is on my own heart, I have to know that's a beautiful heart God gave me. So I'm saying to anybody who's sharing this conversation with us out there, your heart is gorgeous. It beats with as much of God's love as mine. And it would be a blessing to me to be near you. Not because I know you already or know, into what narrative anyone needs to fit. I don't know you yet, but I would be really excited to meet you, to experience more love in the world because we came close to each other. And, the song that you referenced, it's so powerful to me. I wrote that song for my daughter, for her Simchat Bat, for her naming. And, it's words from Psalms. I didn't write it's been funny. Someone says, words by Menachem Creditor. I'm like, I didn't write that. That's King David, But it says, Olam Chesed Yibaneh, and it doesn't necessarily mean what I'm pushing it to mean. The original context is Olam, forever. Chesed Yibaneh, right? God's chesed, God's overflowing love is what builds this world. But the way that I push it, I don't think the text originally says what I'm trying to make it mean. We have to build this world from love. And what that means to me in this moment of memory is we need to recommit. We need to recommit to love each other well. And in order to love each other well, I'm speaking to myself now, I'm not preaching to anybody else. I have to be prepared to recognize that your heartbeat is something that I don't quite understand until you decide to share it with me. And even when you do, I won't understand it fully, but I do get to love you. And if I'm lucky, I'll feel the love come back. And, I'll not ending, we don't have that much time left, but I'll share one further thing. One of my favorite phrases in halacha and Jewish law is Berov ha'am hadrat melech. When more of us show up, that's more of God showing up. Especially in a pandemic, especially right now. I want us to be together, and I want us to be together safely and lovingly and gently, where affirmation is the assumption. That's what I'm committed to. That's what I know you're committed to. That's the dream. That's the dream of truly living a religious life, where the human limited experience is simply something that we continue working on so we can outgrow it until we can see more and more the way God sees all of God's children.
It's so beautiful. And I could listen to you also. I could listen to you sing, I could listen to you preach and share. I want to respond to one piece about to love a neighbor. We don't, the Belzer Rebbe doesn't get quoted so often in progressive circles, but he points out that the word kamecha is the same numerical value as God's name for judgment, Elikim. But the end of the verse ends with Hashem. That when a person is able to shift it from the selfishness of kamocha, right, being internally focused of I'm entitled, it's my centric existence. So then we're able to actually, God will reciprocate that and be focused on others as well. So it's a great Belzer Rebbe. Right, but it's true. You can't love another like you love yourself. And anyone who's ever been in a relationship knows that like the brokenness that we have within is often transferred. I also love the idea of Berevam Hadras Melech. It's a halachic principle, right? And so because my education in the Meyer and in Lakewood is very much in that space, I've looked at the kind of the competition between the principles of Berev Am Hadras Melech, as that it's better for kind of one person to represent the community, like reading the Megillah, for example. We have one person reading it for everybody. That's better, right? That unity is better than, as opposed to mitzvah boy, that it's actually better for a person to do something himself than to have a messenger or a representative. So we have two different teachings. So it's a dispute around Havdalah between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, the houses of Hillel and houses of Shammai, and whether people should make their own Havdalah or one person should do it for everybody. And I've written about it for those who are interested. It's in the book. But I do think it's a really interesting model that when we think about the contributions that we can make to God, there's an awareness that, like Hillel says, Im eina nili mili. If it's not for if it won't be for me, no one else can be, because nobody else is me. And so one of the things that I think is so powerful about the teaching is that if somebody else can do it, right, and is a position to do it, so then they have my support. I'm there as a participant, like you said, that the default, the baseline, the dominant culture is one of affirmation, and like I'm here as a person to be supportive. But when the offering is something that's unique, that it's lost if somebody else can do it, because nobody else has my voice, nobody else has my unique life experiences, my platform. So then it's on me because nobody else can do it. And it's for me actually a deeply guiding principle. The halachic principles of when do we deploy this and this have for me actually been deeply, right? And this is a principle that you see all over. If a person is learning and it's a mitzvah that's that somebody else can do it, so you have to let them. Nobody else can help the person cross the street, then you can't learn. You have to get up. So when we think about it, and I want to kind of transition this conversation to, okay, so what do we do about this? In the world of ideas, yeah, God loves everybody, but the lived experience, right? The space between the intentionality of God and the impact of individuals in this world, unfortunately, is vast. You know, in our culture, we have the idea of a Talmud Chacham, someone who's wise, is called a Talmud Chacham, and it's strange because the word Talmud means student, and the word Chacham means, right, like a wise person. They don't really go together. So one is that you need to have humility to see yourself as a student, right, to be able to. But the Bali Musar say, those who focus on kind of mindfulness and kind of self-evolution, offer a different interpretation, which is that we are meant to be Talmidim of the Chachma. We're meant to be practitioners of the wisdom, that there shouldn't be space between that ideal and the way in which we live our lives. So I want to kind of shift to, okay, practically speaking, right? There are people that are suffering, people that don't have, right, the ability to just, you know, talk about these things as if they're making a contribution to the world because now they're sharing their ideas, right? We take up enough space in the universe. We don't need to take up more space, right? So the question becomes, right, how can we in this moment kind of empower people? What can you do tomorrow? What can you do today that will benefit on the ground, right? So in terms of leadership, you know, you'll notice for those who are watching that we have our pronouns, that by our names, right? We're letting people know that they're invited to share their pronouns, because we recognize that not only is it not a binary, it's not always obvious, and we want to lower the threshold of people being able to communicate to us of who we are. When it comes to physical buildings, even though we're not going so much into buildings, just like the mezuzah on the door lets the passerby know that this is a Jewish institution, so too do LGBT flags and trans flags, and signage in general around bathroom access, having all gender bathrooms or gender neutral bathrooms. There's a lot that we can do around accessibility. There's a lot that we can do around the sensitivity of, as an ally, recognizing the struggles of that lived experience. For folks who are genderqueer, public restrooms are scary. Going to an airport, a person who has transitioned, but perhaps not all the paperwork, right, aligns. People who perhaps haven't had top surgery and wearing, you know, binders and things that are meant to present the world by I don't use the word concealing, but in airports, there are people who are trained to look for that which is being concealed. The anxiety, the pain of just going from place to place as ways in which we have never thought about. Things which that have never been on our radar because we don't think about these things. You know, when we think, even in language, when we think about like female, feminine hijack gene products, right? Well, some men have a uterus, right? It's not just about the female. So there's all sorts of ways, you know, and obviously within Jewish law, a man of trans experience who gives birth, is that an affront to matrilineal descent? Is it body part specific around conversion that you can't be uncircumcised, or is it about a gender identity that you need to be circumcised, right? So there are realms of work that needs to get done. That's not for everybody, because not everyone's an expert in those places. But there are some really practical things that we can do. Keshet has wonderful resources. CBST has wonderful resources. But there's no substitute to narrowing that proximity. One of the other awkward parts of allyship is that it's not fair to ask those who are already overwhelmed with the oppression and the pressure of society to dig deeper to make it easier for us. It's not fair. It's not a fair ask. It's not their responsibility to educate us. It is our responsibility to become educated. And so there are people who are very much kind of coping with the world by trying to affect change by being activists, and themselves are trans activists. When we invite people to our communities to speak, it's really important to provide the financial support of trans and genderqueer folks being able to tell their stories. When we think about hiring people, are we sensitive to the diversity of our workplace? When we think about projects that we have that we can kind of outsource to people, are we looking to support organizations that themselves are LGBT friendly? Or, you know, when we spend money on other recreational things, how sensitive are we with the resources that we have to make sure that we are not supporting those who are oppositions beyond the obvious of who are we electing and how are we lobbying and what are we doing legislatively? You know, there was just an initiative a few years ago in Massachusetts to legalize, discrimination against trans folks. So I've shared a few of some of the practical. There are wonderful books from trans thinkers and trans scholars. Joy Layden in particular is one of my favorite. There's a wonderful children's book, just to name Bear Bergman, who's a wonderful I don't know what the right word is, producer of material and resources. But Keshet has a wonderful website. Again, CBST does as well. Rabbi Creditor, I was wondering if you would share some of the principles of allyship that you have in social justice around gun violence that I know that you've been very much involved with, and also any practical suggestions that you have from your experiences to try to empower people to feel like they can today do something different to help advance the cause of trans inclusivity and equality.
Let me start by this. Your list is the list. Anything that I add to it is useful, I hope, but not a replacement. I would start where you started and make those the principles. It's clear to me that our work environments and our community gathering places require a lot of mindfulness. Thank God there's some of it. And with the training that Keshet has offered, including when I was first ordained, the founder of Keshet, Edith Klein, who's a very dear friend of mine, took me out for coffee. Keshet then was a Boston-based organization. I was in Sharon, Massachusetts. She took me out for coffee and just listened to my confusion, and became a very dear friend and an important teacher. So I think what I want to do is not put myself in the leadership of this, other than amplifying the great wisdom and work that's being done and that got us this far. So, so I think gratitude is my posture. I think us taking the time and trying to bring our community's attention to this conversation today, to honor those who did not receive honor when they were alive. I think that is a major commitment that we are making, because it also speaks to the culture of our institutions and communities. I know that it's not enough to talk about things, which is why I don't want to add anything to your list. Like the mezuzah, right? There are physical things we're supposed to do to manifest what we say we care about. I've long said that in Judaism, faith is what I do with my body. So instead of re-shifting to the gun violence prevention work that I do care about and I think does intersect with this, I want to focus just on this, as if this is a just, and say again, you are such a precious person to me, and your teaching is so important on this, and I'm going to do everything I can to amplify voices like yours, let alone the voices of trans people who we are loving out loud as two straight cis men. My role on this, I think, is not to presume upon my self-expertise or the true understanding of lived experience, but to convene and amplify, which especially today, I'm grateful that we are taking the time to do. I will say this, that UJA-Federation is the largest local philanthropy in the world, and we represent a lot of different parts of our Jewish community. We have made it a point to amplify Pride Month. We have made it a point to do the work, and it's ongoing in our work environment, in the physical plant of our offices, when please God we'll be able to return and work in person, and the way that we hear each other and represent each other for the larger Jewish community and as a very significant Jewish community to the world. So I want to challenge all of us, especially those who might be listening right now, to be brave and to know that there is room at every planning table for this conversation. There's room at every allocations conversation for this. And that if we want to change, if we want to do the hard work of raising this world up, we can't be quiet because we don't know enough. Or rather, we should be quiet when we don't know enough. But we can't be shy in this way.
Yeah.
We can be clumsy, but let's try to do the best we can, the most good we can. And let's learn to be a little bit more graceful in our language. Let's remember who our teachers are. And those are our trans sisters and brothers who have lived experience to share, through whom God's wisdom shines.
Yeah. Yeah, language is really hard. Even when we're thinking about being conscious, we throw in words like "hey guys" or reinforce the binary. And I've tried a lot now to talk about siblings as opposed even to brother and sister, and it's so awkward. As
soon as I did that, I was like, wait, I did it.
No. This is friends. This is such a teachable moment. That one of the problems with allyship is I think it's perceived as like there's this bar that's so hard that it's impossible to get this right. It's impossible to get it right. It is. I live and breathe and like obsess. I don't even like sleep. Like I think about these things in such ways, and I can't tell you that there's a time where I feel like I got it right. Yeah. I can't even name one moment where I felt like I could not have done this better. We can always do it better. And I think that's part of what it means to be an ally is, like you said, it's clumsy. Like good people with good intentions doing the thing. Like literally as we're doing the thing, we are learning that like it is so ongoing, but that can't be a deterrent. Because it's easier to say, listen, I don't have the language, I don't have the skills. Right, but do you care? And if you care, as we do, then we can throw ourselves back in the straight, and that's where the struggle is. So I want to thank you for being honest and raw and real by naming the brokenness and experiencing it and showing, then we actually have a chance to be able to heal it. But if we deny it, then we can never get better. I want to say that there are two easy things for us all today. CBST in partnership with Kashet has created a yahrzeit candle. This year it is more complicated to download the sticker and get a yahrzeit candle. So we're asking folks to take the picture and to share it on social media. If you have a candle and you want to light it, which is the Jewish tradition, that memory is a call to action. When we remember something or someone, we want to incorporate their good deeds as a way of honoring their memory. And the second is the other day on the calendar, which is March 31st, is Trans Day of Visibility, and it's a day to celebrate. And it is it's a day that we at CBST, in partnership with many organizations, I think when we did it last year, it was also with UJA, in addition to Kashet, that we are hosting again a virtual convening of trans Jews. We have a wonderful director, Ariel, of the convening, and we invite people to thank you. You can look at it in the comments here, and you can come to CBST's website to show interest or reach out to CBST if you are genderqueer, trans, and you're interested in being part of the convening March 31st. It's in the middle of Passover. We have all sorts of wonderful things, exciting things that we're putting together. It's for trans folks, genderqueer folks, by trans and genderqueer folks. And one of the other things to the broader audience is that we are also going to have an allyship track this year, where we're going to be reaching out in partnership with other organizations to local communities. Because when we think about changing the world, it's not on those who are being marginalized. It's not on them to fix the dehumanization. It's on us as a community to do that. And so if your community is interested in doing something on March 31st this year, for the allies in your community to try to really advance the cause and bring more awareness and celebrate the lives and the contributions of trans folks and genderqueer communities, also please reach out to us. And this is not a tale of two cities. This is the best it's ever been. And it's better because of people who are brave to be able to live their truths and tell their stories. And I just want to say personally, I appreciate it. God appreciates it. This world, when we lose just one person, is not the same world. And when we have a world, when we have people that could be happy and productive and living and learning and giving, but instead they're living in fear, that's not a way to live. And, it's one of the things that separates us from God, right? That God is not afraid of anything else. And we're created in the image of God. And the only fear that we should have is disappointing God. We shouldn't fear about violence. We shouldn't fear about hunger. We shouldn't fear about those things which are ungodly. And so, Rabbi Creditor, thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being my teacher. For those who don't know, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. Rabbi Creditor's father is a rabbi in Richmond, Virginia. I picture your mother giving you haircuts. Your mother is a super lovely woman. She's always been kind to me. And so I have tremendous hakaras hatov to you and to all those who are listening. Understand that this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. The world has changed so quickly. And we have so many people to thank. We are standing on the shoulders of those who sacrificed in ways that we've never been tested. So I just want to acknowledge all of that and to say thank you. And if there's anything that we can do, or if you have ideas on how to, or you want to get more involved, please reach out because we can't do this alone. And Rabbi Creditor, just want to give you a space for final thoughts. And thank you again for being here with me in conversation.
Your tears are so holy. And may we have fewer tears in this world. May Shabbos give everybody a chance to lay down the load just a little bit and breathe deeply. In this moment, to say breathe deeply, I really mean air. Please, God, let's have some air. So thank you for sharing this space with me. Thank you for inviting me into it. And I'll look forward to learning again soon. Thanks everybody for being part of this. Thank you to CBST for doing the work of hosting, to UJA for partnering. And really, Rabbi, I love being your friend. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. And I hope that this Shabbos for everybody provides some real manucha, some real rest. May there be a lot of shalom in everybody's Shabbat.
Amen.
Thank you, friends.
Take care, everyone.